Rise up, the Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up, rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.
And welcome back to a whole new season of the D's on Fire podcast, where we talk about the defending A10 NCAA appearing men's basketball Duquesne Dukes and the soon to be A10 champion women's basketball team of the Duquesne Dukes. It's been a long off season. Meant to do some pods. Life got busy. Alec is still busy. And we have Zach to fill in and talk all things Duquesne. Zach, I know you just had the soccer seasons end last night. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on those seasons that you took so much time covering this year.
My calves are in agony in a good way. That's the recap. No, it was unfortunate how the women's season ended. Right, there was some stuff going on behind just to try to make everything go together, and that posed some challenges. And there were some extended layoffs as well that I think kind of long-term disrupted rhythm. And beginning of this conference season, there was a game at Richmond that I think everybody agreed should have been won. It's a rebuilding club in the second year of rebuilding, and after such a successful non-con, you want to get things started the right way. And you concede one back of the net in the first half and really didn't generate enough chances in the box that game to really make an impact. And then you make a difference at Rooney Field throughout the season, but you lose to SLU convincingly. You lose to Dayton convincingly. You lose to St. Joseph's at the end to eliminate yourself from postseason consideration. And it's a shame because a really good group of kids, a good group of girls that really played lovingly and fearlessly for each other, and it ended prematurely. There's no doubt about that. But it's a good group that it'll be interesting to see what the off season brings. But within that, it is a very prolific junior class, and of course, Margie Brown receiving A10 second team honors, and of course, Haley Longwell getting freshman honors after an ACL injury cost her last season from playing. So, really good story there, and some other good individual efforts too. Mac Muir, one of the captains, finding the back of the net. Brianna Moore playing with joy. Maya Matissa, Maddie Noondorfer in goal. I mean, there's so many names you can rattle off, but I'll kind of move on. But I felt really sorry for the girls that their season ended the way that it did. And as for the guys, Rooney had been a fortress for so long, and Chase Brooks alluded to last night that maybe they thought because this was Rooney Field and we always win at Rooney Field that was going to be the case and they'd find a way. But in less than 2 minutes coming out of that locker room and after halftime, they ended up being mistaken. And I feel really bad for the seniors, Maxie Hopfer especially, a kid that really grew up on this campus, and not just on the field. I'm talking about off of it. Of course, he was a captain as well, but he's a guy that just embodies everything that Duquesne is all about. Is probably the highest praise you can give somebody, and the relationships he built not just on the field but with administrators, with other coaches. I still remember at the Duquesne Awards, the Duquesne men's basketball team was in a very bad mood that day because their coaches did not nominate them for any awards. And the one time they broke being grumpy was when Maxie won one of the Duquesne Athletics Awards, and Day Day Grant was so happy. I was sitting next to Day Day that night, poor guy, and it was one of those things where you could see how happy he was because those two had filmed that video and gotten to know each other over the year and treasured that relationship. And in that short time, they built a bond that maybe will never be broken. And it's a credit to Maxie. That's just who Maxie is. I think already between Maxie Hopfer and Darius Parentis on the football team, it's going to be a really, really interesting race for the Duquesne Athletics Male Athlete of the Year because both have made extremely convincing cases. And I mean, I would frankly call it for Maxie right now. That's just how good he's been. And that's no slight at Darius. Darius has been just as good, if not better, than Maxey. And other guys that have been solid. I mean, Jesper Moxon is playing every single minute of the season. You see that out of a goaltender consistently, a goalkeeper, but out of a defender that really just the physicality he brought into the offseason, just so many, that back line was just so good the entire season. Chris Byangel, I mean, Ashton Gell chipping and Blaze Hardy breaking through. Again, so many names, and being able to do enough offensively. Dakota Yonke stepping up, Jackson Irvin taking a starting job and moving on. I mean, Zoltan Nagy in goal really grew so much this year, so it feels premature as well to see what happened last night. But I mean, it doesn't take away from what was done during the regular season. A double-digit win total, protecting Rooney Field. It was a 12-game streak at least heading into last night. So it's a shame to see it end, and you could hear a pin drop when everything went final at Rooney Field last night. So just touching on both of them, it felt like both ended prematurely. Great group of kids, really special group of kids. Just unfortunately, I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Only one team in the conference is going to be happy, and this year neither of those are the Duquesne soccer teams.
Yeah, and both did have great starts to this season in the non-con schedule, or season one, as I know the coaches kind of refer to it. Yeah, it looked like about halfway through this year that both of those teams could have magical runs, and it could just be a continuation of last year's athletic success. Um, and then the conference schedules didn't go according to plan. But the one team that is having a magical year so far that you touched on a little bit by mentioning the quarterback, uh, Duquesne football beat crosstown not so rivals Robert Morris to take sole possession of first place in the NEC, and Robert Morris could help out the Dukes even more next week by clinching essentially the playoff spot for the Dukes.
Well, it's a talented team as well, and there's some injuries just like last season that have really brought forth a lot of fantastic efforts. Jamario Clements as the tailback really strikes me coming off the page on that. Of course, Taj Butts was extremely dynamic last year and still a very dynamic back, but as a result of his early season injury, Jamario really had to put a stamp on that position, and he did. And I mean, when you do so much that you're offensively, where you're being marked every single week, and you're still getting past the century mark, it says a lot about the trust that Anthony Doria as the offensive coordinator and Darius Parentis as the quarterback have in him. Joey Isabella's healthy now, and he's breaking through. It's week after week after week. We joke about Maxey score, 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 score. Well, all Joey Isabella does is score, 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 score. I mean, so many weeks with a touchdown. There's a lot to say about it. And what John Irby's been able to do, he broke out kind of. He introduced himself to Duquesne fans in the week one loss to Boston College, if memory serves correct, or one of the first week. But regardless of that, you all second week. I mean, the first week for Irby was his breakout, but Irby was fully loaded yesterday. 3 touchdowns for the guy, and just has been a special teams ace at times for this team as well. I mean, getting it done. Defensively, Jack Dunkley continues to do what he did last year. You have so many breakout performances. Gianni Rizzo's been fantastic. AJ Ackerman's been healthy. His body's transformed. His effort has been good. I mean, so many names that jump off the page. Kevin Kersinger's been fantastic, and it looked for the longest time that defense was going to pitch a shutout yesterday afternoon, which is incredibly special. And I mean, you're of course there were several coordinator changes as well during the off season, very close to the season all told, and it seems like they've gelled. They found what works. Of course, Jerry Schmidt, the longtime coach, Duke stick together, and they've done just that through all of it. And you have guys that have stepped in and really just weathered the storm on a week by week basis. And I think they were reminded last week, the Mercyhurst game, just nothing's handed to you. You have to come in and earn it and take it. And because Duquesne was the preseason favorite, because Duquesne did what they did last year, they're the hunted again. So they're going to get every single team's best game. So it's on Duquesne to find a way to exceed that compete level. And last week was a very stern reminder that just because you're home, as the men's soccer team learned last night again, it doesn't automatically guarantee a win at the end of the day. And one loss, especially yesterday to Robert Morris, could have really changed the course of the season. Now Duquesne's, it's not dormy because they still could share or they could lose out, but I mean, you have an opportunity with these next 2 weeks that it's win in your back, and it's going to be very very easy to overlook or to look ahead. But Jerry Schmidt is always on one day, one play, and so his guys, his boys will be ready next in a week's time. Here, Saturday will be the regular season finale, and then of course on the road to end at Central Connecticut State is always a tough game. A few years ago, they cost Duquesne the chance to win the NEC title that day, and you had the everybody there at the NEC with the trophy ready to go, and then you have awkward, strained silence. And so they've been on both sides of that. They know what it's like, and of course last year the feeling, because they've also won it outright and they've shared it. To win it outright last year was special, and it's a group of guys that have come back and a new challenging group that have made this work under the guidance of a very talented coaching staff. And how special is it? And it's also fun to watch Dave Harper during these games too, because Dave, if you've seen Dave during a game, he is intense. He is into it, and he wants nothing but a win for his team. And it is fun to watch Dave just lose himself in these games. Dave being the vice president of athletics for those that are not familiar, but it's very very intriguing to watch him watch a game because he is just as competitive and intense as the players on that field. So a huge shout out to the football team, and it looked when it looked like the fall performances were going to be breakthrough. Football has been, just ever since the Youngstown State game, just been off to the races. So a credit to them because this has been very well earned success so far.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe just one more win does it and gets them into the playoff. But like you said with Schmidt, one play at a time. I can't see them wanting to rest anybody even that last week if things are clinched. So uh, should be a few more games ahead that are exciting to watch for the Dukes. Um, now let's get to what what do you want to start off with, the win or the frustrating losses from the basketball side?
Let's rip the band-aid off.
All right, so the Drew Joyce era has started off 0-2. I don't think that really adequately reflects the talent that he's brought in, the hard work by the coaching staff by any means, but you are what your record is. I did tweet or put on Blue Sky that I think the Dukes are the best 0-2 basketball team in the NCAA. Not necessarily something that you want to brag about too much, but I looked through all the teams. They still might be the best 0-2 basketball team.
I mean, congrats.
Yeah.
Um, it's in a sense it's familiar territory, right? Because of the 0-5 start to A10 play last year. There's no necessarily not any reason necessarily to be discouraged by this 0-2 start. There have been a lot of guys that are either injured or guys that missed significant time in the off season that are or sometime towards the off season that are just now getting back. And frankly, the scrimmages did not go well for Duquesne. So to see 0-2 next to its name is not necessarily the greatest, but there's no panic button because you went up against two preseason favorites. I mean, Lipscomb's an established team that has a lot of experience, and the guy that went off for 29, 30 points on Monday was a guy that was injured last season. So if you don't think he had that date circled on his calendar, then you're kidding yourself. It's tomfoolery on your end. But Lipscomb was everything Duquesne wasn't, and old, experienced, together. And not just, I'm not saying Duquesne's not together, but I mean more that they were, through the ebbs and flows, they were consistently themselves. They weren't out of character. They didn't really even bend, so they definitely never broke. So the identity was very much present. And it's a tough first game because in that sense, Lipscomb's everything that Duquesne wants to be, but isn't yet. And I still think that Duquesne, looking at the roster, if you just put both rosters down, Duquesne is the more talented roster, but Lipscomb was the more together team, and that was the difference. I know Dr. John Giannini was saying, "Oh, it was the defense. Oh, it was the defense." It wasn't the defense. It was that Duquesne wasn't together. And I'm not saying they were they were fake tough. I'm saying that they didn't have oomph, or as Keith Dambrot would like to say, they died on the vine. That's really what it came down to. They just didn't have enough juice in the proper moments. They almost played like front runners, but weren't front runners. And it's tricky because you have these fans that are still on the hangover, and understandably so, of making the NCAA tournament. And that's extremely special, especially when it's been 47 years since that's happened. But on the flip side, this is a new season, and Drew Joyce III did not want anybody really talking about last season or focusing on last season, and it's because it's different. There's definitely some different wrinkles, and you could see that play out on the court twice this week. But it came down to decision making. Too many floaters, just not enough offensively, just not enough consistency there, and it's tough when you're up against a 15-2 deficit before you can even really say media timeout. So that raises a lot of challenges as well, but it's an opportunity. Look, we took their punch, now it's up to us to counterpunch. And they would counterpunch, but when you're on your back and you're it was the equivalent of being on your back, getting up and putting your fists up ready to fight. There wasn't a left, there wasn't a right, there wasn't an upper. That was a terrible left right upper, but you get the idea. So that played well, thanks YouTube. But it's one of those things where there definitely were some good performances, but the free throws just absolutely screwed them in that first half. And it screwed them really the other day too in the Princeton game. And these are things that they practice consistently. Where if under Keith Dambrot and under Drew too, you get 2 free throws, you don't make one, you run. So I mean, it's not like they don't practice this in a game in as close to a game like situation. You just have to knock the damn things down, especially when you're shooting on your own rim, the rim you consistently practice on. So there's a lot to be said there. I understand they practice in the side gym a lot too, but that's beside the point. It's still your home rim. So you know your home rim's, whether mentally or physically, better than anybody else. And you come in there, you have the women that just came off of a win, and you took the fans out of the game at the start. And give the fans credit, when Duquesne needed them, they were absolutely there. But it's very, very tricky when you start off on the wrong foot. You burn a timeout 2.5, 3 minutes into a game, your home game, where everybody's eyes are on you and you're excited and they want to see what you are, and that's the first impression. Jakob Netjes has been banged up in stretches during the offseason. Dave Dixon started the offseason by not playing. Jake DeMichael missed a couple of weeks. He was in a boot thanks to someone that posted a picture on Twitter and spilled those beans. But I've had the opportunity to watch many of these Duquesne practices, and they've pushed each other. They've had a good standard. But when, you see the good, you see the bad. And, I mean, honestly, they get a pass. I mean, Drew, I think, jokingly fired the schedule maker, and that's understandable. But I mean, who else is going to start out by playing Lipscomb and Princeton? That's a very, very tough draw for a team that's just figuring out what it is and coming together. Eli Wilborn might be the most exciting player that fans have seen so far, and you have to live with some of the mistakes early. Just some of the fouls weren't wise. The flagrant one where he elbowed the guy wasn't the greatest, but he made up for it on the other end. Well, first of all, the guy missed both free throws, so I mean that helps. But Eli was able to bounce back and immediately get it back with that loud block that transitioned offense to defense and was one of the best looking sequences of the entire night at Princeton. But you have so many. Kareem Rozier, I think, has definitely shown improvement, and he told me this year he was going to bring it. And if Duquesne fans have learned anything about Kareem, it's that he's usually pretty darn good on his word. So he did promise that they were going to bounce back, and it was looking like they were going to bounce back for the longest time, but couldn't figure it out. Monday, what cost them? Their lack of adjustment to the zone, and just their lack of being present in the moment, quite frankly. Again, not being established. The Princeton game, that was everything defensively that they should have been the first game, but they needed to see what they looked like on film in an actual game. When you're in a scrimmage, you're in an exhibition, you're playing lineups or combos that maybe you wouldn't otherwise play because you have to see who gels well with whom under the lights. And you had the dress rehearsal on Monday. And I do think that if this game was played even early December against Lipscomb, I think Duquesne wins it. I truly do. I think it's just bad timing, but you have to see where you stack up, and you have to do it against a legitimate team. And Lipscomb is absolutely a legitimate team. Again, preseason picked first. I know preseason polls don't necessarily mean anything, but when you're facing a metric like that in your first game, it's still something to look at. It keeps you honest. Princeton was frustrating the living heck out of Xavier Lee. And that was what people were looking for last year, and that was the key. And their guys, him and then Pierce, didn't really get going until that second half. And I think Duquesne again got caught in some foul trouble, especially from the post positions where it created some challenge. I think again you're working on timing, but second half the game was theirs. You're up 11, you have them staggering, and just you have to finish that job. Anytime you have a double digit lead, just stay the course and finish the job. And they shrunk for a small bit of a small stage in that moment, but that's again the non-conference is learning time. I think that Duquesne fans understand at this point that if they want an NCAA tournament bid, they have to take it and do it themselves. And this non-conference, I think you're going to have to live with these two losses, just because in the long run, I think it's going to help this team figure out what it is, and I think long term it's going to have to help Drew Joyce figure out what this rotation is going to look like, because there were huge rotation concerns, as Nick is very, very, very familiar with a specific big player named Andre Saversov. But it's it helped them in the long run. I had to throw a shot your way, but it was one of those things that they learned, and they're going to continue to learn as they get healthy. Eventually, Alex Williams is going to be back. Eventually, Chabi Barre is going to be back. You're going to have reinforcements, but you have to figure out what you are with what you have. And I mean, it's not any different to when Trey Williams got injured early last season, and then when Duchan came back before conference play started. These are two. I mean, Chabi started most of the non-conference games last season, showed some promise, showed some areas of growth. And of course, Duchan was an established guy that never played at 100% last season, but gave his all in absolutely every way, and earned and yes, deserved to probably be a starter on that team last year, and had the opportunities. And even though he didn't necessarily show up on the scoreboard every single day, had a role, showcased himself, and sacrificed himself, and did the work to put himself in that position. And there's a lot to be said for that. And these guys, and Drew too, they're all figuring out who they are and what they need to be. And it's a difficult transition becoming a head coach. So these two games, there was a lot to learn, there was a lot to prove, and now they have a week where they can just go back to the lab, figure it out. And DePaul is an extremely winnable game, and it's a very sexy name because of past success, but it's a game that's very, very winnable, and they need to win that game. Not because it's a win, but because of what it represents in the continuity. You don't want to get into an 0-3 hole to start the season, but it's a very, very talented side. There's no reason to suggest there's going to be a drop off, and knowing them, they're probably watching the heck out of film, trying to figure it out, and I'm confident that they will, because it's a good group of guys, and it's a group of guys that I think can put it together. And they showed that again when they did it on the defensive end, that they can find success and they can find offense off of that. Sometimes playing it off of the offensive end causes a little bit of stress and causes a little bit of poor shot selection. That was very evident the other day on Friday night against Princeton. But you take the good, you take the bad, you learn from it, and you move on. Again, there is no panic button whatsoever. This is non-conference play. This is learning time, and you will always have the fans that'll be in your corner. And if you find ways to win, then that number is only going to grow. So it'll be interesting to see what they learn and what they take away as they head to DePaul for the Friday tilt, and then take it from there. But again, overall themes: need to be a little bit more patient, need to be a little bit more learning, need to be a little bit more healthy, but that comes with time, and just take it from there.
Yeah, and I agree with you, especially in the Lipscomb game to start the season. The biggest difference looked like there was one team that knew its roles, knew its identity, and played that way, and the other team, which was us, had a lot of guys trying to find their way, kind of force their way into the game at times by trying to assert themselves offensively. It definitely seemed like our team was more focused offensively on trying to find out how they are, as opposed to locking down defensively and letting it come to them. I did think that showed up a lot better in the Princeton game, especially in the first half, where it felt like last year, where we could just lock down a team for 5-10 minutes, and expect to do that successfully, regardless of who we were playing. I am a little concerned about Dixon just because he looked like he was struggling at the end of the game with injuries again, possibly his knee. So that's a concern on my part, especially because of how valuable he is, both defensively and offensively to start this year already, putting up double-digit points in his limited minutes against Princeton. I did tweet out that I think I might be crazy because Wronski hasn't gotten too many minutes yet, but it feels like the returners might be the best group, at least playing together and having that offense kind of flow as opposed to forcing their way into it. The ball movement that I saw between them, the known roles that each of them have by playing together for last year, it and the defense with the rotation and the help, it just seemed so much better when it was Netchis and Dixon out there. Not to take anything away from Wilborn, who did have some great highlights. And Corbett played the most minutes of anybody on the Dukes. But I, they're still working these things out, obviously, and that's what non-conference is all about. It's just frustrating as a fan seeing the success from last year and wanting to see it more, especially with the talent. Like you mentioned, this is probably a more talented team than the teams that we faced over the first two games, just from a talent perspective, individual against individual. It's just kind of a matter of focusing and in the mental aspect that they just need to lock down on. I'm trying to think if there was anything funny that I had to ask. I do. John Rothstein said there was the epitome of brutality because we lost a buy-in game. Do you know how much we paid Lipscomb to come to Duquesne to open up the season?
No, but I know how much I would pay John Rothstein to shut the fuck up with his shtick. Does that count?
Yeah, there you go.
He's a talented enough journalist. He doesn't have to do the shtick.
But he lives on the sticks. That's how he became the well-known guy was the sticks.
It's irritating.
Let's see. From the Lipscomb game, were there any of the new players that kind of stuck out to you as showing something that you didn't already know? I know it's harder to ask you that because you watched them practice all off season, so you kind of knew what to expect. But were there any surprises once the lights came on for actual game time where they changed? Maybe there is a gamer out in the crew that you didn't see.
No.
All right. Kareem kind of stepped up offensively over these first two games, at least scoring wise. Um, the three was there at times over the past two seasons. Definitely shown some progress. I'm trying to think of if there's any other players that I saw big progress of. DeMichael's
Matouche.
Matouche.
Matouche. 100% Matouche. A kid that, as I wrote in the book, had COVID his freshman year, and really, freshman year just had so many complications that stemmed out of COVID. And last year, you saw some of that potential in A10s. You saw some of that potential at St. Joe's when he made the big shot that nearly forced overtime. But he had good days and he had bad days. But it was a chore just last season. He had to make a choice just to get into shape for himself and to find his game again. And credit assistant coach Ari Stern for helping him get to that point. And Drew helped him as well, just to get to that point. And then him and Jakob just became gym rats day by day. But now Matouche is healthy, and that's really, really dangerous because now he's just not coming in to spell somebody. Now he's coming in and the level of play is increasing. And you can see his confidence is very different. It just looks different and it feels different when he's on the court now. And it's not necessarily one of those quick hooks. You know that he can play a position, almost any position on the floor, quite frankly, anymore in a positionless basketball game the way it is now. But he also can keep you honest defensively. He's moving a lot better too. So I would say Matouche is probably the most improved of the returners just because there was not as much work to be shown before. Now, Kareem's improvement I think comes from the fact that he took being benched for Jake DeMichael the right way. I think, he's a competitor, he's a leader, he wants to be out there, but when he talked to me in the off season, he was explaining to me about how long term it made him work harder than ever and made him hungrier than ever. And he's thankful that Keith benched him because it brought that out of him and he did not have that in his arsenal as sharpened as before. So really those two are the most improved of the returners. Jake's been good, and talking to Keith Dambrot, actually had the opportunity to visit him in Akron over the summer while I was out covering a golf tournament, and he felt, obviously this is before the DeMichael injury that he had that sidelined him briefly. He said that he thought Jake was going to be the best player this year, and that says a lot. I mean, really, even though he was always high on Jake and wanting a role, it was Terry Wygand that really was the one that said, "All right, Day-Day's out. We're going with Jake." The easy thing to do would have been to do this, that, the other. They went with Jake, and the rest is history. And, it wasn't because Keith was gun shy, but I think it was just one of those collection of idea kind of things. So, and of course, Jakob again getting back to health. He's so capable. He had to switch on to three different defenders each of the first two games. So, Jakob has literally been a Swiss Army knife, and I don't know if he's still all the way healthy yet. So, I mean, Dave, I mean, again, I mean, he's a guy that's really been banged up. He's not had a truly healthy off season yet, but he just continues to go to work, and he had 3 blocks against Princeton too. So I mean, you hope for the best. You hope that he's healthy. Obviously, we'll have more answers on that in the coming days. But I mean, Dave's just an animal in the best possible way. I mean, we'll see what he does, but I mean, he was expecting to break out, and quite frankly, he's always last year he really showed he should have been an A10 defensive player, all defensive team selection. He was really disappointed that I was probably the only one that voted for him preseason. So he definitely feels something to prove. He has an absolute chip on his shoulder, and now you just have to hope he has the chance to showcase that some more. But I mean, in terms of newcomers, I would say Matouche won just because you haven't returners. Matouche won just because you haven't seen it, and it's been there, and now he's getting that chance. And then Kareem too, in terms of most improved.
All right. As far as the new guys and trying to find kind of I guess consistent lineups, the first 2 games, it seemed like Coach Joyce had the starting lineup of Rozier, Edwards, Corbett, Netchis, Dixon. And then the second line was also relatively similar, where he kind of just put the next 5 guys out there and they played together. Is it kind of going to be a shift change uh, sort of mindset, at least through non-conference play, until they figure out better rotation, do you think? Because it did happen again in Princeton as well, where he had those same 5 kind of play together mostly.
I think it's going to be a trial by fire. I think just like Keith, he's going to go with what he feels most comfortable with and give that the first shot. And then when that's proven not to be the case, then that's what it is. Quite frankly, I mean, a big reason why Safrasov ended up not making the rotation was because of what happened at Loyola Chicago, was what I was told by one of the players. He was consistently beaten by the same play time and 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 time again. The exact same play, the exact same action. And that was kind of the moment when, okay, I mean, we've given him as an experienced guy the first shot. It's time to move on. And I mean, I know you and I were talking, and I think there was some frustration on your end that maybe Max Edwards hasn't been producing at the point level that you would expect. And I think the Drew Joyce answer to that is the Keith Dambrot answer to that, which is we know what his averages are, and we know he's due, and it's going to happen. And it's not like he's not doing anything out there, because quite frankly, he's still rebounding at a very, very good clip. He's a guard that's exceptional at hunting for the ball and rebounding and letting his team get out on the run. And in this system with this team, there's a lot to be said about that. So will Max Edwards start on Friday? Yes, and he should. And quite frankly, I mean, the guys that be behind him, like a Trey Dinkins, who I voted preseason third team, just he has not shown it yet. And that's not saying he won't or he will. I'm fairly confident that he will, and I think it'll translate over. It just hasn't yet. So there's no reason to make a lineup change yet, because you haven't had that that point guard capability or that off shooting guard. You could say Matouche, but Edwards has been doing it longer, and you stay loyal to the guys that have been able to and shown the ability to produce. And he deserved that. And late in the game, yes, he got pulled, but he did inside the stretch have an opportunity before he did. I know that the Princeton game wasn't a prolific game at all, but it's one game in a potentially 30 something games, 20 high 20s, high low 30s game season. So I don't put too much stock into that. I do think Jay Sean's shown some improvements to me. I feel that his confidence is in a really good place right now, and he strikes me as a confidence player. And when things get high, when things get low, when those free throws didn't go in, I was really impressed and pleased with his composure. And I think that's a really, really important step for him. I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself because he knows he's good and he knows this team is good. And quite frankly, I think that, he has a very, very high ceiling. He has to trust himself. And, is his shot a little unorthodox? Maybe. But there's a lot of unorthodox shots. I mean, Jake DeMichael's shot's unorthodox, but it works for him. Jay Sean's one of many lefties on this team. There's quite a few lefties on this Duquesne team, which is something that fans probably haven't seen in quite some time. But I mean, Jay Sean's impressive. He's earned his starting spot, and rightfully so. And again, it felt like the game last year, the Chicago State game, was almost like an audition, so to speak. And he definitely passed, and he was very impressive. And anybody that meets him, he's a really, really good kid too. I remember the first practice; might have been the first one that came up and introduced himself to me. So I was really, really struck by his professionalism there. But I think, he's probably been the most consistent Duquesne player so far, which in a time when there hasn't been much of that right now, I think is sorely needed, and there's a place for that. So that's really, really encouraging. Again, I think Alex Williams will eventually get healthy and can play a role within this team. I cannot say the same, unfortunately, for Brandon Hall. I don't expect him to play, but I mean, that remains to be seen. But again, I think the biggest weapon that this team is going to have, besides its depth and besides its talent, will be its health. And getting back to full health, I think, will be more dangerous because this team will be allowed to do a little bit more than what it is right now. And I think that would go a long way. But I think long term, I mean, that I think they have the right guys in for the time right now. And I think what you've seen on the court has justified that. And if it hasn't justified that in your mind, it's because there hasn't been enough necessarily seen by those that are on the bench to kind of supplant that, quite frankly. I mean, you could make a case for Wilborn, but I mean, to make a case for Wilborn would be to not start Dixon. Not to mention, Dan brought teams were always huge on having that one or two guys off the bench that can just bring that fire immediately and raise the compete level. So there's a lot to be said there too.
Yeah. So for Corbett, I did want to mention, love his athleticism, love his upside, love his effort that he gives basically every possession, whether on defense or offense. So I am very high on him. As far as the starting lineup, I think the biggest discrepancy that I've thought of and that people on Twitter have noted is DeMichael's absence. Now, Keith was big on pointing out that the starting lineup isn't necessarily the most important lineup. It doesn't really matter, but in the grand scheme of things, but it does strike you as odd that DeMichael, who was so important for our success last year, isn't in there. Now I think in the post game presser after the first game, Joyce brought up the fact that DeMichael was still working back essentially from the offseason injury. So that might change as the season goes along as well, just from him getting back into game shape. But did want to point that out as kind of the one player that has seen some tweets going on. Bo Dilly, I don't know if you. Yeah,
It's not time. He's not stretched out yet. He's not at full stamina. Remember, guys, he was in a boot, so it's going to affect his mobility, and with his mobility, that's going to leave him less open and less space. So, for right now, should he start? No. It's almost like the hockey player. You have to do the line change. He needs to be out there. He needs to get the reps, and you can only do that in a game. Should he start right now? No. He's not fresh quite yet, and That's not a knock on Jake because I do feel he's absolutely one of the five best players on this team. And that's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that right now, it's, I think you go with what's healthy, you go with what you know, you give Jake the time to go with that, but not as a starting five. Again, like you said, it's not an end all be all, but the plus minus from the Lipscomb game was minus 17. That's not good. So he's still getting his time. And remember, non conferences plus minus when he did get in last year was not encouraging either, but he figured it out. Give him, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and he'll be right back to his old self, probably closer to two. But I'm not a doctor. I don't even have any inside information. That's just a guess. But what I will say is as he gets his legs under him, absolutely he should be in a starting lineup. But again, he was in a boot, guys. He was publicly in a picture in a boot. He wasn't practicing towards the end. He got back in. He ramped himself back in. So it's not Jake DeMichael's time to start yet, but it will be Jake DeMichael's time to start sooner rather than later.
And one other thing that I did remember from the Princeton game. So you were not there in person. You were watching along the stream with everybody else. Did you
Yeah, the
also
stats sucked.
do you share the frustrations with the production quality of cutting to replays while the game was going on?
No, I was uttering expletives at Jim Duzick because the stats were incorrect the entire game.
That's true. You did voice that to me. You voiced it online as well. That was
I voiced it in my recap too.
Yep, you did. Um,
That's
all right.
unprofessional and that is unacceptable. This is the Gazelle group that's run so many tournament situate game experiences in season, postseason. This is veteran staff people that know what they're doing. This was the second game in a doubleheader, so you had a whole first game to figure your shit out, and you didn't do it. And you have fans that might not necessarily have access to have watched the whole game and are relying on your stats and are getting incorrect information. Kareem Rozier made at least three threes, and you have him on record for two. You can't do that. And whoever was doing the official book should have been correcting this and did not do that either, which is equally guilty. So your job is to have the stats be correct because it's important. So you have the incorrect score the entire game until the last minute and a half of the game, and then you finally get the score right, but the stats are still wrong. I mean, it's not that hard to read a number on the back of a jersey, call it, and then figure it out. I know it's harder to go back and figure out in code what needed to get fixed. That I understand. But you wouldn't be in this jam if you could actually keep a damn score of a game. So, I mean, the whole thing was unorganized, and because of that, I don't think anybody got accurate stats after the first media time out of the first half. So, I mean, the whole thing was pathetic. It was unorganized. It would have been a silver lining for Duquesne fans if they could have pulled away with the win. But, I mean, just an unprofessional operation, really disappointing. Sorry.
Oh, you're okay. So, you did mention Alex Williams, and obviously I'm not familiar with him because I haven't seen him play with the Dukes.
I haven't either.
Right. And Alec and I are very much more watch and react kind of I'll say analysts very generously. Fans is the more appropriate term. Do you think he's going to be more of a 4 or another 5 option that they have coming off the bench? Because if he and Chaubby are both going to come back as 5s, that could be a very diluted situation. And who else is going to play 4 besides Netchis and Corbett in that situation?
I think you have to see where he's at and how he fits when he's healthy. That's really what it boils down to. What's his mobility like? How do you play to his strengths? I mean, he's upping his level coming from Furman. I haven't seen anything in person because he hasn't had the opportunity yet. That's not to say that he won't. I'm confident at this point in time that he will. But I mean, how will it look? What position is he going to be on? A similar Dushan minutes count kind of a situation? I don't know. The longer that situation takes to unfold, the more challenging that is going to be to answer. But I mean, he is working tirelessly to get himself back into the shape he needs to be to get cleared, and you just hope that he does get cleared at the end of the day, or that if if it happens to take a turn in the other direction, which you hope is not the case, that he can find happiness with this group and still have a way and continue to have a way to have his voice be heard and leave an impact on this 24-25 season. But I mean, what I can tell you, good kid, really good with the aux in the weight room. Uh, his music selection is always hitting in the weight room. I will give him absolute props for that. He's introduced me to some good G Herbo music. I'm not gonna lie about that. But regardless of that, I mean, you just hope for the best. And what position he plays, I think you let that play itself. What position do you maybe you need, or if you feel that he is at the capability of producing on the court, what area do you need him to produce at? Is it the three? Is it the four? Is it the five? I don't know. So have to see how things unfold. And do you just give him 2-3 minutes, get back on the bike, and then get ready to go back in? I don't know. So we'll see how it all plays out. But were he to play, I would be excited to see what he would bring, and I definitely think that he would up the compete level of this team, no doubt about that.
And I will bring up that uh, we've got a situation where Tomlin has famously said two dogs, one bone. You have that with the point guard battle essentially with Dinkins and Rozier because in theory, they both could be on the floor at the same time, but it seems like you kind of have to pick one or the other. With the only other position really where that is absolutely the case in basketball is center. Because if you're a center that can't play power forward, then you're fighting with every other guy to get on the floor and to prove yourself. Do you think that's going to cause any issues with this team, or from a personality standpoint, from what you've seen, do they all seem to truly be buying into the team concept?
They're truly buying in. I mean, it's different personalities, right? Dinkins is much more reserved. Rozier's a leader. He's much more vocal because he has to be. And that's just more of his personality. It fits a lot better, too. So I think when you have Rozier, he's a guy that was in the position that Dinkins is in now. So he understands that side of it and he can empathize, but he also has to put out and show out for himself too. And he's been able to do that. And I mean, Dinkins has the capability of starting, and he doesn't have to necessarily do it at the one. He could do it at the two if things don't pan out with Edwards. I mean, that's always a possibility. But you lose rebounds by doing that potentially too, and that can also affect the flow of offense. I think so much of the game is looked at by the casual fan as, can you put the ball in the basket, and now maybe can you get a stop? The rebounds are just as important as the points because it's how you set up your offense and how you get into the pace that you want to get into. And quite frankly, I mean, there's Edwards has a place in that consistently. So Dinkins is going to have to work, or he's going to have to figure it out that way. But I mean, take nothing away from him. He's a great player. It's just the first two games when he's had his number called, it hasn't worked out yet. That's not saying it won't work out because I'm confident that he will. Again, I put him on my preseason third team, and I put Max Edwards on my preseason third team because I truly believe in what both of them can bring into the team. But it hasn't worked out yet. But also, we've only seen 80 minutes. And to overreact on 80 minutes would be complete journalistic suicide on my part. And I don't think is a fair statement to make. I think that there's a lot to be said that Drew is high on Kareem as the leader. He's challenged Kareem maybe more than any other guy. He's probably, when I've been at the practices, he's probably gone after Kareem just as much, if not more, than any other guy on the team because he knows what he's capable of. So I think there's a lot to be said for that, and it shows that Kareem, again, whether it's loyalty earned or both, has earned the first right to play. And if that were to change, either by his own doing or by someone else's doing, then so be it. But Kareem has earned that right. He has taken it seriously. He is determined to secure that as the leader and as a producer, and he's given chances, and he deserves those chances. So it's always tough when one player goes that somebody has to be on the other side of that. And it looks like that's what it is here. But I mean, take nothing away from what Trey's doing. Trey's doing good things. It's just we haven't seen it yet in the game, but we will.
Yeah, we'll leave the overreacting to small increments of game time to myself and other fans. Although I did want to say I thought it was shocking that I saw some fans already talking about how the team is resting on last year's success, and that they were too busy doing a trophy tour in the offseason to get ready for the season. That's clearly not the case. They were in two tight games against two very good teams. So to think anything otherwise about the offseason tour, which was great for a fan base that needed to see the success and just needed to see the trophy in person to show that it's real and that last season wasn't a dream. I thought that was a good touch by the program in the off season
It's
to
been
have.
47 years. They have not had success in 47 years. And you are complaining about a trophy tour where fans have an opportunity. It's a valuable recruiting tool. Not to mention the guys practice in the mornings for 3, 4 hours during the summer. The trophy tours are at night. Uh, there's no, not to mention it doesn't affect any of the many new players anyways. That doesn't affect them. They were not a part of last year's team. Really, it's university officials and Drew, and then the assistants have the opportunity. Anybody that wants to come can come. So, I mean, you're really reaching and grabbing at straws if you're blaming bringing a 40-pound trophy across town so that fans actually have an opportunity to take their pictures and enjoy and be a part of this success. So you are really barking up the wrong tree. I mean, would you rather of them won a meaningless 100-55 game just to make 2-0 look better? I'd rather see these two games, see where they stand, let them learn from those, let them deal with some adversity and be a better team because of it. You don't gain any points by beating John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt by 50 points. I'm sorry. It's the case of Duquesne has always been to be overlooked. So beating John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt 2 times is not going to make you one of the automatic bids on Joe Lenardi's ESPN bracketology. I'm sorry, they're not. Would have been nice to go 1-1. Ideally, I think you want to at least go 1-1 in that. And should they have been 1-1? Yes, they should have beaten Princeton, but they didn't. And this is where we're at. But I mean, it's just what it is. So I get that being a fan is short of being fanatic, but if you're gonna blame a physical object for why they're 0-2, then you have no clue. As a matter of fact, Drew has stifled the message. For the book, I mean, it would have been understandable if he didn't want to talk to me. I was surprised he talked to me at all about it about last year because he's been so gung ho, and the guys have relayed the message that they don't really want to talk about last year. That's what media day was for, and that's about it. So, I mean, they were picked where they were picked preseason, chip on their shoulder. They had two really challenging games, 0-2, chip on their shoulder. Let them play. That's it.
By the way, I just wanted to clarify. Pitt didn't play John Jingleheimer Schmidt. They played Radford and have Gardner Webb up next. So similar quality, but just wanted to point out that starting the season off with no name teams, Pitt's very good at that. I don't want to be like that. Sorry, had to get that across as the fan. Let's switch to the team that will be playing Pitt later this year in the only city game. The women's basketball team, who showed off their new style and beat the Princeton team that was receiving top 25 votes going into the season. I don't think fans have truly captured how special that win could be for to show how special this team could be this season.
Well, this was a team that had Princeton on the ropes last season to start the season. Very similar situation. And they folded in the fourth quarter. Call it what it is. They choked. They didn't do enough, and Princeton found a way to win in their gym. They had Princeton on the ropes, and they knew it. So when they were practicing, and again, I was at many of their practices as well, they were practicing for this team, and this style of play has been a progression. They've told me about what's happened in the scrimmages. I won't go into that. That's private. But I will say that it's been a progression, and those male practice players are really, really challenging, Nick. I've seen the intensity that they play with. And SID Trey Staunch plays on that team as well, and he's got some game too. Shout out to you, Trey. But really, the style is not going to wear on teams until the fourth quarter. That's what they said post game. That's what I saw in practice. That's what they talked about. And that's exactly what happened in that same fourth quarter that they blew it last year. Their conditioning, their will, their determination, their execution was eons better than Princeton, who did not make a field goal in the fourth quarter until 28 seconds were left. By that point, is in the words of the singer JoJo, it's just too little, too late. It's one of those things where just Duquesne wanted it more. Duquesne was the fresher team because they had 12 players that rotated throughout to keep them fresh. Did Meg McConnell play 36 minutes? Yes, she did. Should she have? Probably not. But I mean, with this style of play, this is where you're at. You're going to have the opportunity to give players rests. That way they can come and get a drink, get a blow, come back in and produce again. And I mean, you can scout for it as much as you want, but you didn't condition in the off season for it. There will be times that maybe Duquesne will be out talented this season. That's just is what it's going to be. But those 50-50 games that were truly 50-50 or maybe went the other way before, now are on Duquesne's side because they have the stamina, they have the ability, and they have every single player from the top on down that is going to play that believes in itself. And there's a lot to say about that. And really, there hasn't been this much stifling play since the NCAA tournament year that you were part of, Slick Nick. That's just a matter of fact. So, I mean, you don't overreact on one game. We just discussed that. But beating Princeton is one of the better wins that Dan Bird has had in his coaching career. He said as much, and it wasn't just beating them, it was seeing some of the players on the other team get tired and essentially wave a white flag. And that white flag was relayed in the huddles, and it turned into a green light. And what did that green light entail? Beatings, beatings, beatings. It's very, very difficult, and it's not fun to play against when you're being run up against 94 feet on both sides of the ball. And that's what you're going to get from this Duquesne team this season. Every single practice I was at, Dan Burt came up to me and said, "You know you can't tell anybody about this, right?" I go, "Yes, Dan, I understand that." When I got a call about the last scrimmage they had, I was told by the coach, "Just so you know," I'm like, "Yes, I understand. I won't say anything." On the surface, it's one game, but it on the broader scale, you have prepared all off season to play Princeton, to get them uncomfortable in what you do. And it looked like they were still tipped off by, I don't know, maybe a scrimmage coach or somebody, but they still were not conditioned enough for that fourth quarter. And that fourth quarter might have been the most dominating defensive quarter in the Danbert era. And that is saying a lot because he's in his 12th year. He's been in numerous WNITs and he's been in an NCAA tournament. But those 10 minutes might have been, if you were a fan in the stands, the most fun 10 minutes you have seen Duquesne women's basketball play. And that is a very exciting prospect for how the rest of the season could potentially unfold.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say I wasn't there in person, but from watching over TV on the stream, it felt like the NIT game that I was at last year with the energy that the whole building had watching them play.
At the end, yes. At the end.
Well, that's what I was referring to. Yeah. Um,
They sleptwalked through the first 3.5 quarters.
right. I was referencing the Lauren Wasselson comeback charge that was just a
Yeah.
legendary moment. That's what it
Yeah.
felt like for an entire quarter, a quarter and a half of Duquesne basketball just to open the season. It was great to see. Um, I've got a few individual players I want to ask about. Keandra Brown, she was on the team last year, didn't get as many minutes. I mean, one, size I understand in the need for size is gonna have her role expand. Two, she made some amazing plays on the defensive end, drawing charges like no other. I tweeted it and Dan referenced it. She's the new charge queen. She took it away from Stasia King, who had it as the Duquesne's charge queen for since I was in school back in 2015. But what was that? 4 charges basically in the second half alone drawn.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, with her, I think she knew she was getting this role, and although she had a minor injury that she had to correct, you can just see a physical difference in Keandra. And I said as much to her after practice that I was proud of her, and you could tell it meant a lot. And Offensively, I think in the past, last year, she had moves where she did travel consistently. And by and large, that's gone. Not to mention, she's also added a 3 point shot. Not to mention, the 3 point shot she hit in the third quarter was extremely critical towards the continuity of what Duquesne was doing because they had gone cold offensively. So her three might have been one of the biggest offensive plays, but her biggest play was the play where she gets a steal, she falls down, she's on her rear, passes it up to Meg, who outlets it for the basket. And just that brought all of the energy, bigger than any of the charges, just because it got Duquesne started on one of their 7-0, 8-0 runs. And really, that was in the second half, again, when things needed to get going. So Keandra's shown a lot of improvement. And let's face it, I mean, again, like you said, Duquesne is a smaller team. The rebounding statistic isn't going to carry as much weight as it did in the past, but those rebounds are important because it allows Duquesne to get out. And the veracity at which Keandra is playing both sides of the ball is needed. It's encouraged. It's what we saw in the city game against Pitt defensively, but on a much higher dose. And this Duquesne team is going to need to continue for that to happen for it to be successful.
Another player that kind of sent me back to my practice player days, Nadia Moore. I can just tell that every practice player must hate matching up against her. She reminds me so much of rarely played but physical Tyra Jones, who was here for 1 year as a freshman and then transferred. She was a nightmare to guard. Uh, Literally busted my head open once on a loose ball. And I just imagine Nadia is going to be just like that in practice and in games based off of what I saw from her in this first game.
Well, first of all, it's Nadia. Uh, so, or Dia, whatever you want to go with, just so you can. But no, I mean, that's how she plays. The quote, the money quote was, we know how well Megan McConnell rebounds the ball defensively. Nadia Moore is her offensive counterpart. There seems to be a Dan Burt, Dennis Rodman line every single year with a player, starting with Eniku Kuder, and Nadia Moore is the Dennis Rodman of this team. The way that she was hunting rebounds like one might hunt wabbits in the fourth quarter was exceptional and kept continuity. The one sequence that comes to mind immediately was Duquesne getting a third and a fourth opportunity, all because Nadia Moore was able to box out, find lanes, and get rebounds. And now opponents are aware of it, and now they have to match up and keep her honest, which is going to lead to fouls and is going to lead to her finding her way. And not to mention, she had 10 points in her first impression to Duquesne fans, and she's she is a throwback in a lot of ways, and she is a local kid. I mean, so it's really good that Duquesne keeps one that's in that area, surrounding area, and she really brings a lot to this team. She really does pack a punch, and she did it off the bench where when there's so many line changes, sometimes it can be really tough to establish yourself in the game and find a rhythm. But it shows that she's accepted her role, she's aware of what her role is, and now she's just going to go out and execute it. And Nadia is really it's encouraging, and quite frankly, it would not surprise me if she makes an all freshman team. Quite frankly, she was the most impressive freshman out on that floor, bar none. And there were some good contribution from the freshmen out there. But Nadia is someone that has to be marked on the court, and that's only one game in, just because she showed so much. So credit to her, and a credit to the staff for getting it out of her as well.
Yeah, I mean I keep looking through the roster, remembering the gameplay, and it really is. There are so many players that kind of give similar vibes to the players on those teams that went to the NIT and NCAA tournament back in the day. I mean, Caitlin Ammons from West Virginia too, and has that three ball that Angela Staffolino showed in the A10 tournament game that kind of sealed the deal that we were going to the big dance. The Journey the Jet is just, I know she hates that nickname, but it was just all of these guards really just fit this offense in this style so well. I know it wasn't fully intentional, but then once they accepted into this role of run and gun and out condition and outwork every single team, this team has something special that I could see it being a very successful year. I know you've already kind of alluded to that. Um, are there any? I guess the biggest concern would be foul trouble for our two big players. Is there any plan to work around that if that you know of?
The scrimmages, there were a lot of foul troubles. Uh, there just was. So that was a big point of emphasis going into Princeton. That Princeton scored in the mid 60s in points with how Duquesne plays and with who Princeton is as a team says a lot. And one player you did not mention that needs to get mentioned is Rami Queta. Just, I know the points weren't the most. She had 6 points, but when you're 3 of 3 shooting and the and one that she had getting an offensive rebound, dribbling in, hoop and harm was her best play in a Duquesne uniform. And I asked Bert about it after the game and he was glowing, but I was at practice the other day and before the players told Dan you talked too much, the last thing he said was, Ramey, you played a damn good game on Monday. So, I mean, Ramey was a kid they were really excited about last season. They thought that she wasn't going to have that big of a role last season, and then preseason she just blew them out of the water. But it just didn't translate into games. It didn't, and she was practicing well. I saw it with my own 4 eyes, but it was one of those things that just it didn't show on the court, and it was unfortunate. And it would have been understandable if she was down. And I think Dan alluded to it. He felt that some of the things the staff didn't put her in the best opportunities to be successful. And this year, this is a style of play that really suits her. She can go to the basket and she can shoot. She can be a ball hawk defender. She can come in for spurts, come out, come back in fresh, and just bring the tenacity. And that's really exciting to see. I think that Gabby Hutcherson deserves mention. Were the points there? Did she fill a stat sheet? Not as probably much as she would like to, but with how smartly she played with 4 fouls in that fourth quarter, still set smart screens for teammates, set them up for success, made the pass that put the players in successful positions. Really encouraged by that. Raina Green came in with her as a defender, known as a defender, spent time with the team last season, and she had a nice rise and fire corner three, and so did Nadia for that fact. A corner three as a freshman in a huge game. Kate Ammons, this is what we saw at Longwood, but now in this system, this is what she's going to have an opportunity to do. And we still haven't seen Mac Blackford unleashed yet, and I'm looking forward to that because she's just as fast in some settings than Journey is. So those two running and Kelly McConnell, if she gets an opportunity, if those three are in the game at the same time and there is a fast break, just get out of the way. Quite frankly, I mean, these three are probably some of the 3 fastest players in the Atlantic 10, and that is not an exaggeration. Journey's game continues to grow, and it's been a joy to see that as well, and she's earned that starting spot. So, I mean, they're playing 12 right now. Gabby Grantham Medley is getting healthy, and of course, they're ready to play 14. And there are games where they will have an opportunity to play 14 players as long as they produce. And they won't be shy to do that, nor should they be, because quite frankly, it's an exciting brand of basketball. If you can give Meg McConnell some rest so she can be fresher, that's huge too. But don't just give her rest to give her rest, but because the talent is there, the depth is there. This is a style of play that fits this team that will make opponents uncomfortable. It made one uncomfortable. We are doing this before the Penn State game, so that is going to be interesting to see how it looks against a team that also has gotten it done, but in a road setting. That's going to be interesting to watch them bring their noise. And that's going to be must watch television. And obviously, we can draw more conclusions from there. But one game, again, not going to overreact, but really impressed with what I saw from just about every single player that was on that court producing something positive.
Yep, and Gabby, when she was in, um, felt like she was kind of showing the experience and leadership with the ball. I mean, I am super micro-analyzing, but she was calm. She wasn't trying to take anything that wasn't there in the minutes that I saw. And then I remember Coach Burt talking about Montage this offseason, being very
Hmm.
excited for what she's going to bring as well. So uh, it's going to be a fun year.
She makes free throws. Maybe the guys should take notice.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, it's great. It was like the guys' free throw struggles were contagious because both teams that they played also struggled shooting from the free throw line. Um,
Yes.
so I
But
don't know.
Angela's really impressive. She was Duquesne was really high on her going after her in the transfer portal. She was the person by percentage that was the best 3-point shooter available in the transfer portal. So when you lose Tess and when you lose Nay, you need someone that comes in. And Angela will make this system fit for her. Absolutely. She's got enough talent. You have to remember she didn't spend the summer with this team. She was trying to play for the Serbian national team. And it wasn't her time at that point, but they're convinced that the next time around that it will be. But just a very tenacious kid, really, really good kid at that too. I still remember the first practice I was at. I was rebounding for RJ, and it was her, it was Mac, and it was Meg. And we were going around the world, and I think she missed like 2 or 3 shots going around the world, going around the 3-point key. So you're going to see that 3-pointer get knocked down in games. You didn't see it against Princeton, but still found a way to get to the line and get points. So, I mean, really, that's the mantra. That's been the mantra of Burt. If you can't put the ball in the basket, just drive the ball or get to find a way to get to the free throw line. And 6 for 6 is a really, really good first impression. And she was the one at the end that was making the free throws. So a lot to be said about that. So she should find confidence in that, and that 3 ball will go in for her.
Yeah, and I mean it's crazy that we've been talking and I feel like Meg McConnell has not gotten enough shine for her career high in points, her clear effort to improving the 3-point shot, which was never was never a shot that she couldn't make, but has definitely improved. And you could see the confidence in it this game. And then also 36 minutes, you say she probably shouldn't have played that. I still think that's a decrease from her average probably last year, where she was averaging 38, 39 minutes a game, seemingly, with all the overtime games as well.
You want her at 30 to 32.
I,
I think she thought at the end of the game she was on the men's team because she was missing those free throws. But regardless, I'm sorry, men's team. I'm really sorry. It's low hanging fruit. But all jokes aside, I joke. But all jokes aside, Meg has really, really put the work in on that. I've seen it firsthand. I've rebounded for it firsthand. It's fun watching her and her cousin Kelly compete against each other, just bringing it out of each other. But my favorite, I think, was watching the two of them. RJ and I would be on other sides of the court, and they would have to make threes, and they'd have to run back and forth after each shot, and whoever got to whatever first, I think it was to 5 makes after running back and forth cross court, would win. And watching those two compete, but that's just who she is. Meg wins. I mean, that's literally what it is. You could write the feature and the headline would be Meg wins. I mean, that would make sense. But I mean, she's absolutely the unquestioned leader of this team, but she's allowing others to have their voice as well. And she came back because of loyalty, but she also came back because she has unfinished business and because she can do it with this team. And to score the 24 the way she did, it wasn't just layups. It wasn't just, it was legitimate threes. I mean, she had a 50% shooting clip from three, if I remember. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I think it was 4 for 8. So she also showed a willingness to take the three, which is just as important as making it. You can't make it if you don't take it. But defensively, showing exactly, again, one of the fouls was okay, whatever, but really, by and large, I mean, it's hard to believe that Meg has found a way to improve. But Meg has improved, and there's a lot to be said about that. The fact that we haven't talked this much about this late into it, really about Meg, is because this is what we've expected about Meg. I personally hope that when I'm at games that I see WNBA scouts because she deserves it, really deserves it. And you can't say that about any other women's basketball player really in Duquesne's history. Even April Robinson. I mean, Meg has it. April was special in that she was a shooter, but Meg is special because yes, she can shoot it, but she doesn't necessarily have to. She affects the game in so many different ways. And She makes everything she does and everybody that she's around better. And that's the ultimate compliment you can give, is that Meg is a winner. And if she can stay healthy, the WNBA is an absolute possibility. God willing, knock on wood, Meg has a professional career. Some way, somewhere, somehow, Megan McConnell will have a professional career. I would love to see it be in the WNBA, and I think it would make sense. I really think she could bolster a roster. I think her playmaking ability has a place. I think her voice has a place. I think her attitude has a place. I think her defense has a place, and I think her abilities as a defensive rebounder have a place. And wouldn't it be something if Duquesne retires Megan's number as a WNBA player? It's sincerely possible because she is that special of a player, but she's also that special of a person. It would be very, very easy to let all of this get to her, but the inspiration she is to so many young women and young girls that come up to her. I mean, even talking to Alexis Bordas, who announced her commitment to Duquesne for next season, she was the first player to do so. We talked and she talked. Maybe her longest answer was about looking up to Megan McConnell and how she is as a leader and how she operates. So even in West Virginia, even across the world, people understand what the McConnell name is, but that Meg has become her own person and distinguished herself. And she deserves so much respect for doing that. And I personally am so proud of how much she has grown and found happiness. I almost wish that there was a red shirt her freshman year just so you could get another year of it. But I mean, that just is what it is. I mean, it was so special, and to watch her grow as this team has grown from trying to figure out how to win games in a Division 3 arena to figuring out fourth quarters to figuring out crunch time to being 20 wins to being postseason players again to this, Meg's build has been just as dramatic as this team's build, and it's not done.
Yeah, and I mean, from the outside in, there would have been a lot of people who would not have blamed her for leaving Duquesne, given the huge change that we're undergoing this off season. But I mean, she's a leader. This is the definition of a leader: is leading by the actions that she's given. This is her team. She's known it's her team, and she's ready to take this team to new heights that people are not expecting them to. Possibly this upcoming game against Penn State, where obviously any outsider is going to think that Penn State should win this game easily. I don't know if that's the case. It'll be a fun game to watch. Sorry, you folks won't get a recap of that in this pod, but we'll talk about it next game.
Yes, and is this where I plug?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I already have the book. Let me go get that. You go ahead and plug.
Well, it's been a passion project to be an author, and my brother, who Jonah, who is 9.5 years younger than me, said, "No one wants to read your story, Zach." And I go, "Shut the hell up!" But you're right. But long story short, oh, you're double dipping. Okay, but it's one of those things where I was in the Omaha hotel during March Madness, and I pitched to Dave Finoli that win or lose, this deserves to be a book, and I would love to help you write a chapter. And I have all of the biographies for the players, the coaches, and the support staff. Basically, everything from like page 194 on. So until the Sid Danbrough part. But I mean, to get a chance to talk to some of these players, reunite with some of these players. Andrei Savrazov is a 12-hour time difference away. Trey Clark is in Israel. I mean, the list goes on. And to be able to talk to almost all of the players, every single coach, some of whom said they would not have spoken to anybody else about this book, about for this book or in any other setting, this much about it, and to also make the decision to get the entire support staff. I mean, myself, Bob Healy revising and updating his historical piece, Dave Finoli taking you through the game by game, all of us having little personal reflections in the book, and just the heartbeat of itself, the players. I mean, we aim to make this kind of the textbook with the opportunities and the relationships that we've built. Just having the opportunity to get these players to open up in a way that they haven't opened up before. Just this is an extremely special textbook that was written quite quickly, all things considered. in time before the season started so that everybody can relive just what last year meant. And this was exceptionally special to get done. I'm glad that we got it done. I know I got burnt out about 5, 6, 7 times doing this, including 3 times the last week doing it, but I don't regret doing this for a second. I loved every single bit of writing this book. It was so much fun getting to talk to so many people, hear so many stories that I had not heard about before, and that's myself having as much access and trust as I have. So to see some of these players open up, and it's really really special. So we have all of the bases covered in this book in a very very quick time period. It's a fantastic time to get it. Holidays are right around the corner. It's a fantastic holiday present, and I know we have a book signing coming up at some point. The Duquesne Barnes& and Noble still has to get a copy. Right now there's some issues with that, but you can still pick it up on Amazon. It's $17.99 before tax. With Prime, you can get it in a couple days. If you happen to run into me at the Coop or in the Wild or whatever, bring the book. I'll be happy to sign it. And just this was, I'm so happy that the book is in my hand. I'm so happy to have a finished product that really represents this team. I'm glad we got 300 plus pages done out of this too. So you're definitely getting a really really good value on your 17.99. It's extremely special, and it's just that step more. You have the history from the Kings off on the Bluff book that Nick also has in his hand, but Nick is now double fisted. But it's one of those things that was special with the history then, and for a lot of young fans, that's a really really good read to understand the history and understand why Duquesne got as prominent as they were, but also understand why the drop-offs happen, which is also explained in this current book, 47 Years, the story of the 2023-24 Duquesne Dukes. It's extremely special that we were able to get this done under the gun. We were able to publish this so quickly. It's independently published, so please support local independently published work. But it's one of those things that was extraordinarily special to do, and just it brings a smile to my face every single time holding that book up. It's exceptionally special to say the least, and this was a labor of love in every single way. And we've been blessed so far that we've gotten some really encouraging feedback, and really excited about that. And it all kind of came full circle when I got to hold I got to see my dad hold the book. And I mean, that was kind of special. I said this to George Michalowski, and I'll say it again here, the legendary 2 Chainz lyric before I can't say the rest of it, but they ask me what I do and who I do it for. And that was a special moment. And to have that embrace with my dad, who now we live a few hours away from each other, but he was in last month, and that was super special. But please consider buying the book, supporting local writing, and also this is such a special way to enjoy. Everybody has a program, everybody, but you don't have a keepsake like this that really goes in as much depth as we did, beyond anything that I wrote last season and beyond anything really ever written. So this is extremely special, and we ask politely for your support in this endeavor, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to always look back and smile regardless of what happens this season and seasons future. This team will be looked at by so many for the rest of time, and deservedly so. And every single player on this team has a very unique story, so definitely worth supporting the guys as well by buying copies of this book. And it takes a village to make this happen, and Duquesne University was fully supportive in this endeavor, which was critical. The work that Jim Duzick and support and access that Jim Duzick gave myself to make this happen was appreciated. To have the support from Dave Harper on down is not lost on me, and it's extremely special. The relationship that I have with the people at Duquesne as a reporter is really unprecedented, and that's not me tooting my horn, that's me tooting their horn. And it's extremely special that there's just a built-in trust that's been earned both ways to make this a possibility, and it was never a question. So extremely grateful for this. Keep an eye out, it will be coming soon to the Duquesne Barnes & Noble, but for right now at least, the best way to get this is on Amazon. Highly recommend getting it. And there's free trials of Prime, so try Prime for free and get it within a couple business days. So Just really, really special. Just, again, 47 years. Story of the 2023-24 Duquesne Dukes. It also feels really good. It has a really good quality feel of the to the cover as well. So very, very sleek feel. But please consider supporting. It means a lot. This has been a labor of love, and this has also been a dream of mine to be a published author, to be a book writer in this sense, and to have that fulfilled is incredibly empowering for me. So very appreciative of Dave for his trust in making this happen, and to Bob for being a co-pilot on this, but more importantly for both of them for being friends throughout this project and well before that as well.
Yeah, and I the reason I brought both out is the transition from Kings on the Bluff to the 47 years is kind of almost seamless because of the ending, well, at least in the Kings on the Bluff edition I had, where it went into the Dan Brock press conference. And in that press conference, it was clear of what the mission was. And then you transition to this book and the miraculous run to meet that mission. Um, it it's crazy. I haven't finished the whole thing, but congrats on being a published author, Zach. Truly, truly felt like if a book was written and you didn't get to be a part of it, it wouldn't have been a true depiction of last year's team. I mean, you are the Duquesne uh, sports journalist that I, whenever I see any article or any piece, I just know that you already knew it. If it wasn't you that wrote it, or if it was you that wrote it, it makes sense because you've been here all along the journey here.
It's been 14 years. It's it's sobering. It's surprising, but I think as important as it is, well, I appreciate your kind words first and foremost, is that it hasn't just been about basketball and it hasn't just been about football. It's been about all the sports and trying to give some of those sports shine. And that's just as important to me. And I remember when I pitched a story about non basketball to Pittsburgh Sports Now, I was questioned. I frankly was questioned. And I said, why are you questioning it? I mean, if you want to cover Duquesne, it's not just about this. I mean, let's see how this goes. And now I have free reign. And that was incredibly special. And it was the Emma Brinton Olympic qualifying article. And it was swimming coach Dave Sheets's ask. And I said, absolutely. And whether I got the support to do it or not, I was doing the damn article. I mean, there's no two ways about this. I think being a source of coverage for the university is not just based on the sports that have the most eyeballs on it, but it's also about the story. I mean, there's already been so many stories on Duquesne's campus. In addition, I mean, what Sasha Petrochko was able to do with golf this year, a new program, and to post an under par round and to have a performance of the month award in her name already in her first impression with the university for a new program says a lot. Let's not forget about, and Jake DeMichael in the interview for the book shouted out the bowling team. He said that we were a bowling school. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, these athletes do such a good job of supporting one another. I see so many sports, not just at basketball, but I see them at soccer games, and they're sitting together and they come back. And that's what it's all about. It's not necessarily just about being one of the first 100 students to get a shirt or a blanket. It's about athletes supporting athletes. And do you see that at the bigger schools? Yes. But do you see every single team at all of the events? No. It's a very special time. And I'm not saying this is a PR piece, I'm saying this because I've seen it. It's very special watching these student athletes support one another. And they return the favor, and they notice, and they appreciate it. And you don't get that anywhere else. It's incredibly special, and it speaks to what's been building at Duquesne. And that's a credit to the coaches, that's a credit to the individuals, that's a credit to Dave Harper, that's a credit to the marketing team. I mean, there's a lot to be said, and it's incredibly special. And last year was so successful across the board, so many great team performances. Haley Scholler posting an Olympic trial time and swimming at Olympic trials is big time. I mean, you go on down the line. bowling, what they've been able to do. They're hosting regionals. Heck, they're hosting the NCAA bowling championship in a couple years here. So I mean, it's so special. Football continuing to grow. Men's soccer having a really good last season. Women's soccer having some individual record book margins and marks being joined. I mean, there was just a triathlon runner that did something special yesterday. There was a 3M trial qualifying time for diving. I mean, you go on down the line, and every single sport has something special going on. Volleyball taking VCU to the brim on Friday, 5 setter, some really good individual performances there as well. I mean, it's been a special time to be at Duquesne and to cover Duquesne athletics, and I can't cover enough. And I wish I could, because every single team deserves to have something told. And in a sense, I've dropped the ball on that. But I mean, there's only so much you can do. But I mean, it is noticed. And I mean, the buzz was palpable. Being the only media invited to the Duquesne Awards last year and the Hall of Fame was incredibly special. And to the Hall of Fame, it was one of those weird things where it's like, damn, I've been around long enough that I know almost all of the inductees. It's one of those feelings. It's a very weird feeling, but it's such a special feeling too. I mean, seeing those hugs, catching up like you didn't miss any time. I mean, that's what's so special about it. So, I mean, I appreciate your sentiment, but for me, I just do my job and I just happen to love what I do. And that's lucky and that's fortunate.
All right, folks. And to show our support for Zac, again, 47 years, the story of the 2023-2024 Duquesne Dukes. I will put the link up on the YouTube. Not that that'll probably contribute more. I feel like I'll have the same people that have already bought the book watching the podcast, but hey, any publicity can help, I guess.
Sure.
All right. Thanks so much, Zac. This went a lot longer than I thought it would, but
Whoops.
hey, we had a lot to talk about. It was a whole off season.
There was.
All right, folks. With that, see you next week. And I know Zac's not going to join me on it, at least on the record, but go Dukes.
The Dukes are back and now it's time to rise up.